This week in our Excel groups, we're going to continue to talk about the mission of Exponential Church. We exist to introduce people to Christ so they will introduce them to others. One of the purposes that we use, and the last of our 5 purposes that we use to accomplish that mission, is to shine for God's glory. And pretty much all that means is worship. Now, it's kind of sad that in our culture today, we've reduced worship to mean singing in church. We call it praise and worship, where the worship leader comes up and he stands in front of everybody, and usually he plays a guitar, or if he's a little different, he'll play a keyboard, or or they'll just be a singer and they're the worship leader, and we all sing songs and we call that worship. Now, that's not a bad thing. That's actually a great thing, and we should worship through song in our churches. I mean, you can read the story of Jesus, and when Jesus was with his disciples after they had their Last Supper, it says before they went out, they sang a hymn together. So it's good for us to get together and to worship through song. But shining for God's glory, what we're trying to say with that is that we need to live worship. Worship needs to be a lifestyle. It's something that you wake up doing. It's something that you go to bed doing. Worship is something that we live, not something that we sing in church for a few minutes, but something that we actually live out in our daily lives. And when we do that, when we have the idea of God's glory, how can we give God glory? How can we worship God for His glory with our lives? Then that changes the way that we behave. It changes the way that we live. And when we live that lifestyle of worship, it puts us in position, and it also readies the hearts of people so that we can introduce them to Christ. It's really that simple. Now, if we're going to look at Jesus, he's always a great place to look. If you look at Jesus in John chapter 14, he talks about, in verse 13, he says that when we ask for stuff, in His name. And in His name means when we ask for the things that Jesus would ask for, when we ask for things to bring Him glory, it says that we will receive those things so that God might be glorified through His Son. So there's this idea that Jesus existed for God's glory. And so we should exist for God's glory. So we've got these 3 core values that are good to keep in mind as you go out and you try to live this lifestyle of worship. And the first one is never there. You are never there. And what we mean by that is, on the one hand, we need to celebrate what God has done in your life. We also need to celebrate what God has done in our church. But we also can't ever assume that we've arrived, that we're there, we've accomplished our mission, because there's always going to be more people who need to know Jesus, and there's always going to be more glory that God deserves. So never there means we celebrate what God has done, but we also anticipate and strive for God to do more in our lives. And then the next core value that we have is learn, seek, and adapt. Now, what do we mean by learn, seek, and adapt? We need to be humble enough as Christians to learn new things. And we also need to seek out to learn new things. And we also need to adapt the things that we have in our lives to bring God more glory, to live that lifestyle of shining for God's glory. And we also need to apply that as a church. So as a church, our methods will always be changing, because we're always going to be trying to learn new methods and seek out new methods and adapt the methods that we have, or adapt other methods that we see people doing to our own context. So we're learn, seek, and adapt in all things that we do, so that way our methods can help us with the message that will never change, that Jesus Christ is Lord, that Jesus Christ loves you, that Jesus Christ died for you, and that you can be saved through a relationship, through faith in Jesus Christ, the gospel. So the methods will always change, because we need to learn, seek, and adapt. But the message will always stay the same. And then the final core value, it's one of my favorites. It's called Cannonball, and it comes from a song by one of my favorite groups called Five Iron Frenzy. And it's a biblical principle, and what it means is that even when you fail, because we're going to fail as a church, and I'm going to fail as a pastor sometimes. You might expect me to call you or to go visit you, or you might expect me to give an amazing sermon. And you know what? I'm going to fail in all of those things because I'm not perfect. So I'll mess up, and you're going to mess up too. We're all going to mess up because we're just imperfect people. But when we take our failures to the feet of the cross, to the feet of Jesus, and we say, God, I'm sorry, here's my failure, here's where I messed up, God can take those failures and do something amazing with them. He can give them purpose. And that's what a cannonball is all about. A cannonball is falling to the ground, but a cannonball, even while it's falling, has purpose. And that's what we call the core value, cannonball. Because even our failures have purpose when we take them to the feet of Christ. So we've got these 3 core values. The core values are learn, seek, and adapt. Always look for new methods, and let's try to improve our methods so that we can get the message out. And we've got this other, and when we do that, we're gonna fail sometimes. Sometimes we might even try something, and it's just gonna totally bomb and not work. That's okay. When we give that failure to God, He gives it purpose for His glory. And then the final of our core values is never there. We are never there. We've never arrived. We can always do more for the kingdom of Christ. We always celebrate what God's done, but always look forward to what God is doing. So all of that ties into living this lifestyle of worship, living a lifestyle of shining for God's glory. And when we do that, we're better positioned, we're better equipped to introduce people to Christ so they will introduce them to others.